Not only did her students adore her, but they all respected her.
And she was always that one teacher that put all her students before herself.
Her class was full of life.
She never just taught you English either, like she taught you so much more.
Like you always knew that she was the one that you could talk to.
I mean, she was able to appeal to students in a way that most teachers can't.
I thought she was like the weirdest person in the beginning of the school year.
She would say basically anything she wanted to say.
I remember she was just fearless.
She had one of those rare and perceptible smiles that you might come across 4 or 5 times in life.
Just a beautiful person.
She made my life a lot different. I don't know what I would have done without her.
When Gregori High School opened, I think we were a perfect combination of teachers and students. That's what's really driven us up to this point. And Miss Souza was a big part of that. She believed in what she did. She believed in the power of education. She had a lot of fun, I know. I've heard about her antics in class and some of her stories that she told. But I really believe it was the rigor, the level that she taught at in her classroom. And I saw this for the first time actually at Johansen High School when I visited her one day. She was very disappointed that some of her students hadn't completed their homework. So she actually physically separated out the students that did their homework from the students that didn't do their homework. And she taught to the kids that were doing their homework that day. And while that's not an approved teaching practice, I think it emphasized to all the kids in that class the importance of homework and the importance of following the directions in that class. Melinda was a great teacher. She was a great friend to many of us and just a great soul, and we're all going to miss her quite a bit.
Miss Souza, I remember on the first day of school, she was just, I didn't know what to think of her. She gave me this bizarre nickname. She called me him too, and it was just because she was like eavesdropping on a conversation, and it just really didn't make sense. But I thought she was like the weirdest person in the beginning of the school year, and I remember as the year kept going on, she really became more of a friend. You really could just make easy conversation with her. She was a really like easygoing person. She was so funny. I remember it really felt like she cared about us. I remember we were prepping for the AP test, and all of a sudden she pulls out all these goodie bags, and they like had pencils and like they had candy and stuff like that. But it was like a goodie bag for like the AP test. And she's like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about that AP test. You guys are gonna be okay. Like everything's gonna be all right." It really felt like she cared about us. During the middle of the year, like when things would just get stressful, like we'd all be really tired and everyone would just be out of it, and she'd be like, "All right, everyone out." And we would just literally walk around the school for a good 10 minutes. And it was kind of like going into her class. I really was never worried about anything. She was very easygoing. I really appreciated her, and she was so friendly. And she just made the funniest jokes. I remember her Chinese proverbs, and all her they were like kind of dirty jokes, but she really just didn't care. And I don't know, I just really appreciated her, and I'm really going to miss her.
Mrs. Souza was one of those people. She was definitely unique. She would always make you laugh by standing on her head, or she was just like so compassionate. She would bring in her own clothes to donate to kids that couldn't have clothes, and you're like, why would you bring in your own clothes? But she was just one of those people that wanted to help. Like you always knew that she was the one that you could talk to the most. I just think that she was like the best teacher that we could have, and Gregori is going to truly be missing her because she was like one of those teachers who cared. There's some teachers that don't, and she was one of those ones who did. So that's pretty much all I have to say. I love you.
Miss Souza made it pretty clear that even though we're in CP English, that doesn't mean it's the easy way out. You know, we still have to do work and turn in homework, and there was going to be a couple people who failed that class. And so she had been giving us a lot of essays in the past couple of weeks, and I was just kind of getting sick of it. I was like, I feel like I'm not like writing what I want to write. And so then she just gave us this essay that was basically write about what you want to do in the next couple years. And I was like, kind of just sitting there thinking about like, what do I want to do in the next couple years? And so I wrote about how I wanted to build a time machine, get rich, and marry Emma Stone. And Miss Souza read that essay and loved it. And apparently, during one of her pre-AP classes, she was she had started the class, and she was like, "Do you guys know Morgan Lewis?" And a couple of my friends were there, like, "Oh yeah, we know Morgan." And she's like, "He wrote this hilarious essay. I have to read it to you guys." And so when I came out of my fourth period that day, I was walking down the stairs, and a couple people that had walked out of Miss Sousa's class were walking down the stairs on the other side. They were giving me a little slow clap. I was really confused at first, and they said, "Miss Sousa read us your essay, dude, that's so awesome." And I was like, they know I'm joking, right? Like, I'm not really gonna do this, but it was just kind of interesting to see how all the like heavy mental work that I put into SSB4, she didn't value as much as just me messing around and telling a crap load of random nonsense about how I wanted to marry Emma Stone, and that's what she liked over actual work. So that's what I liked about Mrs. Souza.
So I wasn't as close to Mrs. Souza as some students may have been, but just knowing her in general, I mean, it was obvious that she was a great teacher and person. I mean, she was able to appeal to students in a way that most teachers can't even now. She just understood them. Like she would, like most teachers, they may not, if they see you're having a bad day, they might just like pass by, but Mrs. Souza, she'd always confront you and be like, having a bad day, and she'd ask you about it. She wouldn't just, you know, let it go. Another great thing about Mrs. Souza was her sense of humor. She wasn't just on like an adult professional level, and even if that sounds kind of bad, like it really wasn't. It got to students. Like English became my favorite subject because of her, and actually last year was my first year here at Gregori, and it was her first year too. And I remember when I first came, like I think I was early to class too, and she talked to me and she explained how it was her first year too. And so we were both new, we both didn't know many people, but I don't know, it made me feel more comfortable with her too because we had that in common. One cool thing that Miss Souza did for our class, which really made the class personal with her, is she went out of her way to help us design t-shirts where each class had a slogan or like quote something funny that happened during the year, ones that were appropriate for school. And then we even scheduled to go see The Great Gatsby after our AP test because we had just finished reading that book, and so everyone waited for each other after we were done, and we walked over together and we got Jamba Juice and then went to go see the movie, and she sat with us with her husband, so that was nice. Yeah, her class is just one of those classes that you look forward to going into every day, good, like rain or shine. And she made the class personal. It wasn't just go in, go out. I mean, that's how you learn things. That's, I think, or at least in my experience, that's how I learn best, is when a teacher connects with you on a different level, and she was able to do that with everyone, I feel.
Melinda and I worked together over at Johansson. I worked there 13 years, and she worked there, I don't know how many years, but she was there quite some time. And one thing Melinda used to do is, when she let her kids out early, she would tell her kids to say, "You're from Mr. Stewart's class." And so the word got back to me, you know, because I had some of the same students. So that was kind of a joke between her and I. And, you know, I don't know if administration ever found out, but it was just kind of funny because they would always say, "Yeah, we're from Stewart's class." And that was kind of funny. But Melinda, we took a couple classes together, you know, those education classes and stuff. We had a good time. She was great, great sense of humor. I'm going to miss her dearly. One other memory is I'm an electrician, and Melinda's mom was needing somebody to wire her art studio. And so I got my buddy who knew a little bit more than I did, and I was like his apprentice. And anyway, he was you know, one of those electrician characters. You know, had some bad habits and things, but he was a good electrician. So anyway, her mom had left the door open for us, and they were gone, so we could use the restroom. So I went in there to use the restroom, and I found my buddy in the refrigerator eating their ice cream. And I kind of freaked out. I said, "Tony, what are you doing? You can't be eating their ice cream." So I told him to make sure, you know, he cleans it up, because their house was immaculate. And lo and behold, he left the bowl on the counter, and I was feeling like, oh my gosh, I got to call Melinda. So I called Melinda, and Melinda was cool about it. Her parents were cool about it. We kind of laughed about it later, but he was a bit of a stoner, and I think he just needed to get a little food in them. So anyway, Melinda, your parents, gosh, I'm gonna really miss her, and I love you guys, and thanks for giving me a chance to be a part of Melinda's life. Thank you.
I could talk a lot about Miss Souza and all the memories we had of her, like the time when we flipped her bookcase around in the back of the room, or the time we tried to leave her classroom and she ended up being there anyway. Miss Souza was my first ever AP teacher from when I switched schools here, and she made the transition really easy and fun and full of memories. She was always telling me how proud she was of me for doing things that were totally outside my comfort zone, kind of like this, like that's why I'm here. And she always knew things. I don't know how she found out, but she knew things. Like one time she just came in and she was like, "Oh, I heard you were trying out for cheer." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I only told 2 of my friends. How'd you hear this?" And then she was like, "Yeah, I think you should really do that. That'd be good for you." And I was just like, "Oh, thanks." But she was always really encouraging me to do things that I was not usually comfortable with. She was a really good teacher. She was loved by all of us, and she made us more than just a small English classroom. She made us friends and a community, and she always went out of her way to make sure we were comfortable with what we were doing and like knew how to do things. She made sure we were all prepped for our AP test with our tea and all our little pencils and pens and candy and sugar, make sure we were all happy. She's definitely going to be missed, and I definitely love her a lot. She made my life a lot different. I don't know what I would have done without her.
Well, Mrs. Souza was like a really great teacher, obviously. We all know that, and her personality was phenomenal, and she was so funny. I remember she was just fearless when walkthroughs came in and Thor was in there, and we all know how intimidating he was. And we were reading The Crucible, and I remember we were talking about one of the girls, and she said, because the girl in the book was a little scandalous, and she just had no shame, and she, in front of the walkthrough people, she just exclaimed how much of a whore she was. And also, one of the things that stuck out to me about Mrs. Souza the most wasn't only just her personality and how funny she was, but how caring she was about each individual student. She was always trying to make everyone happy, or if people were feeling sad, then she would just comfort them. I remember myself when I was going through some things, she always tried to just try to make me feel better, and she was really a caring person in that way. She didn't care what you looked like or what kind of person you were. She always treated everyone equally, and I think that's what made the most impact on me about her, was that she was such a caring person, and it didn't matter who you were or what background you came from. She loved you all equally, and she was a really loving person.
I loved Miss Sousa's class. She's an English teacher, and honestly, I'm not that good at English. So it was really surprising when I started liking her class and everything. And I didn't dread going to her class. Her class was full of life and fun. I always cherished every moment. She was so funny, and she really connected with us. And I think that was really important, that teacher can be our friend but be our teacher. She expected so much from us, and we always gave her our best. My best moment with her is when our first period class had decided months in advance that we should all leave her classroom and make her wonder where we went when she came back, when she left the room. And one day we were watching movies and she left, and we all ran outside to Mr. Sousa's class, and some people went in, but I remember stopping dead in my tracks because I saw her and she was talking to Mr. Sousa. It was definitely a fail, but you know, she was funny to us and pranked us, and we pranked her too, even though it failed. So I love her, and from the Dead Poets Society, she reminds me of the teacher, and so she's our captain. Oh, captain, my captain.
Every day in our class there was something new. Like, she never just taught you English either, like, she taught you so much more. She motivated you to move on to bigger and better things, and like, her class, like, you were so interested in what she was teaching because she was so fun and outgoing and just down to earth. And I think the whole year I had her, I never saw like a mean side of her. She was always just nice and caring and funny and genuine and just passionate about what she was teaching. I'll never forget like her happy birthday songs and everything she would say to us. Like, it's just so memorable. Just every day. I remember she would just make jokes to everyone. Like, whenever we would read stories, like, everyone was so into it because she made it so fun and interesting. And I remember the day, like the last day I left, like, it was such a bummer because I've never felt that way about a teacher, like, where I couldn't leave them on the last day, and like, I didn't want to have a new English teacher the next year because she was the best. She was the best teacher I've ever had. I'll never forget her, and I'll always regret not being able to say goodbye.
With Miss Souza, it was just different. She cared about her students. She had a lot of different activities that let us have fun in the class. She always told these jokes, whether they were Asian proverbs or stories about Shady Nasty, and she's just a different kind of teacher that actually cared about her students, and I've never really had an English teacher who really cared that much. I mean, she even gave us these marbles at the beginning of a break, and she told us to keep it with us wherever we go because she wanted us to always remember not to make stupid choices and to keep safe, and just to have a teacher really care about us that much, it's really impacting on me, and I'm always going to remember her no matter what.
Mrs. Souza, I don't want to cry, honestly, but she was like, not only was she one of my favorite teachers ever, she was definitely one of my favorite people, like, by far. You walk into her classroom and you automatically, I don't know, there's so much energy, and like, it was such a lively classroom, and every day she just did something that made the class so funny, and you could never describe it, ever. Like, people would be like, why is it so funny? And you'd just be like, I don't know, you just had to be there. And she would always do like these Chinese proverbs and stuff, but she just, like, you would talk to her and you could tell she had life figured out. Like, she really knew how to live life to the fullest. Like, every time she would say basically anything she wanted to say, which was the most accurate thing. And she was probably the funniest person and the bluntest person. I mean, I was in class and like, she always joked around with me because me and her are pretty close. She just was one of those people that, like, right off the bat, she completely understood me, and that was really great. And like, I remember one day, today, I looked like I did this day, and in front of the whole class, she was just like, so Raquel, why do you look so ugly? And I was like, thanks, Mrs. Souza. But it was really funny, and it made me laugh, and it was pretty accurate. So I was just like, I didn't get ready today, sorry. And she's like, oh, I didn't mean to offend you, I just was curious. And that was completely her personality. But aside from her being so funny and so, like, blunt, it was never mean. Like, if anyone else said it, it could have been mean, but I don't know, it was just Mrs. Souza, that was her. But she was definitely one of the most caring people that I've ever met. I remember, like, every time you could tell something was wrong, she would just always be like, tell Mama what's wrong, or like, what's wrong, Raquel, or what's wrong, my child, or something. And yeah, I'm gonna miss that so much. So I remember, like, the first time I met her, I knew she was new and I loved Mr. Orlando, and so I was like, there's no way this teacher is gonna top him, but she so did. Sorry, Mr. Orlando. But I just remember I didn't know what to think of her, and I walked in and was like, who is this lady? Like, she seems pretty cool. She's wearing a cool outfit. And it was funny because she did the same thing every morning. She had her coffee cup and she would hold it like one hand under and like with the handle, and then she'd set down the coffee cup, flick her hair in front of her ears, tuck it behind while she was explaining, and then flick it out while someone asked a question. And it was so funny. But my first impression, it was my birthday, and my birthday was like a couple weeks into school, so no one had a birthday yet, and she found out it was my birthday, and she was like, did anyone sing you the birthday song? Of course. I was like, yeah, like happy birthday, obviously. And she was like, no, like the other birthday song. And so I said no, and out of nowhere she hovers over my desk. Didn't even know this lady. She hovers over my desk and she was like, okay, take all your stuff off your desk. And I was like, okay. So she like pushed it off, and then out of nowhere she just slammed her hands on my desk and was like, it's your birthday, happy birthday. And it was about people dying and spirits flying, and I was like, this is not making me happy. But as you get to know her, it's so perfect, and I love it so much. And I just love Mrs. Souza, and I know I told her that, but like I just want to tell her like all the time because she's the best. One day in class, my stomach was growling so loud, and like if you know me and my stomach growls, like the whole class can hear it, and it was really distracting, and I thought I was gonna get in trouble because she was a new teacher, but she didn't say anything, and like I could never figure out what her thoughts were because her face did not match her thoughts. And I was sitting at my desk super scared, and she just stared at me, and I was like, I'm really sorry, Mrs. Souza. And then she turns around, doesn't say anything, grabs a bowl and food, and then puts it on my desk, and she was like, oh, here, go eat, you're hungry. I was like, okay. So yeah, she was definitely an inspiration to me, and I will definitely always remember her because she's the best. So yeah.
So my favorite memory of Mrs. Souza was when we had our class second period last year for AP English, and I wore a dress one day to school, and she said, McKenna, I really like your dress, it's beautiful. And I was like, thanks, Mrs. Souza. And she's like, well, why don't you stand up? And I'm like, really, Mrs. Souza, you want me to stand up? And so I did, and I was really embarrassed but yet flattered. And then I was like, okay, can I sit down now? And she's like, no, why don't you come up to the room and why don't you twirl around so everyone can see? And so I did, and I was like, really, Mrs. Souza? Thanks. And she was just so cute about it, and she was never afraid to compliment people. And another experience we had in her AP English class was when she told us to write down our motto, and after we would write it down, we'd decorate it a little bit, and then we would put our motto on her wall. And after we did that, she told us her motto, and her motto was to endure discomfort. And from that moment on, when she told us that her motto was to endure discomfort, it really spoke volumes to me, because it kind of just showed me how strong of a person she was. Her motto was super subtle and really simple, but I just spoke volumes to me because I knew she was just a fighter, and she was so positive all the time, and that really showed me how strong she was, and I wanted to be like that. After I left her class, my junior year, I knew I wanted to be more like Miss Souza because she was super strong and just a beautiful person.
There's so many things I can say about Miss Souza, but there's a lot of laughs in her class, and oh my gosh. There's so much I can say about her. She was always positive, and she was always happy. She was really encouraging, and this one time I was like really quiet in class. I was always the quiet girl, and being in her class, she was always outgoing, and that got me to be outgoing. And she was always that one teacher that put all her students before herself, and she was always there for you. And I'll never forget the first time we sang the birthday song. She slammed her hands on my desk and I jumped and I screamed really loud. She'll always be a captain to me. That was one of her favorite poems was "Oh Captain, My Captain." So, "Oh Captain, my captain, you will always be missed." I love you, Mrs. Souza.
Miss Souza is one of the best people I have ever met. She was always so happy and full of life, and she embodied everything I hope to be in a teacher and as a person. Not only did her students adore her, but they all respected her. We all have special memories with Miss Souza, but I think she was more than just a teacher who would take us on walks throughout the campus and stand on her head in class. She really genuinely cared about us, and she made sure that we knew that. She mailed a letter to my house at the end of the school year last year, and I just think that showed really how much she cared, and it's to make the effort to send something and mail it to me, and just to let me know like how much she appreciated me and everything. And I debated all summer whether or not I should write back, and when I finally did, I told her how much we all appreciated her and how much she had impacted me, and how much I aspired to be like her. And I also just told her how much everyone else appreciated her, because I just really thought it was important that she knew that. On the first day of school, I went and visited her, and she hugged me and she told me how much it meant to her that I had said something back, and how much it meant to her and that she really needed it at that time. And I'm so glad I said something, because now I can just know for sure that she knew how much she meant to all of us, and I know how much she meant to me, and that letter is something that I'll keep with me forever, and I can cherish it.
Mrs. Souza changed my life. She was one of the few teachers who openly showed her passion for teaching. She created her own textbook, which was filled with her favorite poems and her favorite essays, and that really spoke to me. Like within the first month of school, I'm like, wow, a teacher put together an entire year's worth of work for us. No other teacher has ever done that, so I thought that was really cool. Really cool. She was the most genuine, flamboyant, and thoughtful person I've ever met. There was never a boring day in her class, and she brought every single person out of their shell. We had a few quiet people in our class, and she always made sure to include everybody in what she was talking about and in the lesson, and make sure everybody, was included in the conversation, because that's what her classes generally were. She wanted to hear what everybody was thinking about, and she would open it up for conversation for the lesson, and it ended up really being a community by the end of the year. We all knew each other, we all were comfortable with each other, and that's not like a normal classroom setting, which is what I loved about her class. I looked forward to it every single day. She was one who made a show out of awkward mishaps. She made jokes all the time. She would call out people when they were messing around in class, and she would just make a joke out of it. She wasn't a teacher who looked down on people. She taught you a lesson when you maybe weren't doing what you were supposed to be doing. She wouldn't say, oh, you shouldn't do that. She would say, you shouldn't do that because of this, this, and this. She would give you reasons for everything, which is what I loved about her. I remember one time we were supposed to have written an essay about All Quiet on the Western Front, and I hadn't finished the book. And so, probably a lot of other kids didn't either, but anyway, she brought us all out into the hallway to speak with us individually about our essays, and she looked at me and she said, you didn't finish the book, did you? And I was like, no, I did not finish the book. And she said, that's okay. Everybody has their own priorities, and it lacked sarcasm, which was interesting. She was totally truthful about it, and that just showed me that she was passionate about teaching. She was not one to scold us because we didn't do our work. She wanted to make us learn things. We didn't have to necessarily take on responsibilities. She didn't want us to see learning as that. She was genuinely passionate about teaching students. She was able to make the little things matter in a way that nobody else could. She would always tell us stories about her husband, and her favorite moments with him, and that was really nice to see. she let us into her life and she would tell us all stories and everything, and she changed the way I thought about life and death. I was going through a hard time my junior year, and sorry, hold on. I was going through a hard time my junior year, and I think she could tell through my writing. The questions she would have us answer, I was really open with, because I figured it was just one person saying it. It didn't really matter, you know. At the beginning of the year, I didn't think that she took a lot of these things seriously, but I learned differently very quickly because I could see the responses. You know, she'd write little things on our essays that we would write in, or our responses to the questions. She would write comments, and just to the little things she said, I could tell she genuinely cared about what I was writing about. And I remember, actually, I don't have this right now, but I remember we had written these essays again another time because we wrote a lot of essays, and mine was crap. I turned it in and it wasn't good. And she openly said, she's like, you know, a lot of you guys are fantastic writers, but you wait until the very last minute and you just turn in crap. And she openly said my name. She's like, Catherine, she's a great writer, but she procrastinates and she turns in crap. And I remember her saying that in front of the whole class. It wasn't embarrassing. It was only Mrs. Souza could say things to students and have them not be embarrassing. But it just she made you want to work harder for everything, for every little detail. She made you want to work better at everything. And she, at that time, I felt like through my writing, since she saw it so much, she was one of the only people who really understood me at the time. And she slowly but surely got into every single person's head that year. And she made us learn about ourselves through the things that we wrote. And at the time, I don't think any of us realized it, but she always knew what she was doing. She knew that she was gonna help us. And I think she changed every single person, and she always knew. So that's the part of her that I'm always going to take with me, how she had such passion for students and making connections with her students and making sure that they knew that she cared for them. That's always going to stay with me. So
one of my fondest memories of Mrs. Souza was kind of out of character for her. It was during the week of AP testing, and we were getting our pep talk, and there was kind of no time left to teach. It was our final moment, and I really felt that I wasn't prepared for the test, and it was towards the end of the year, and I couldn't find my papers for a notebook, and I just started to get really upset about it. And when class ended, I just stayed there, and I just really let it get the better of me, and I got really upset, and Miss Souza could obviously see that, and she came over and she tried to cheer me up, and she was talking to me, and she was kind of saying jokes, and then I got even more upset, and I started crying, and I was just really stressed about the test and that my grade and everything, and I just felt like everything was like tumbling down around me. And at that moment, like, Mrs. Souza was trying to do everything she could to make me feel better. She told me that like I would be fine, and that she was just encouraging me so much on the test, and like she was gonna waive my homework. And in that moment I felt so much better, just because I knew that she cared for me, and she just had so much compassion for all her students. And thinking back on this, it makes me stop and realize that right now in our senior year, everybody is so stressed and worked up about where they're going to college and what they're going to major in and what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And it made me realize that at the end of the day, all that really matters is not where you go to college and what you major in and what you get your degree in, but how you act and the impact that you leave on others. And I think that's the lesson that Mrs. Souza was always trying to teach us.
Mrs. Souza was an inspirational person. Like, she changed my life, and that's not a lie.
I remember the first time I walked into her class, my first thought was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fail English and I'm gonna amount to nothing. I wasn't gonna do anything because she looked so stern. And then all of a sudden, I got the exact opposite of impression when she started talking. She was so goofy. I never thought that somebody who held herself so well and who was so great at speaking, and she spoke words like she had purpose to them. I never thought that she could be such the loving person that she was. It's hard for a teacher to be able to do that. A teacher is usually only your friend or your professor. There's no in between. But with Miss Souza, you respected her so much, but at the same time, you weren't scared of her, but at the same time, you were scared of her because you knew not to mess with her. She had this way about her that made you want to listen to her. It made English fun. That's the whole reason why I keep writing. That's the reason why I try in English, because it's not the most entertaining subject ever. And she just kept saying, find the gold nugget in your writing and you'll get it eventually. And even if I don't get it, I will keep writing, because that's one thing she's always told me, is to just keep trying and be goofy and not to stress out, because a lot of teachers just make you feel like if you don't get an A on the test, you're a failure. And she made sure that that wasn't the case. She wanted you to learn because you wanted to understand what you're learning, not because you wanted to get a good grade on the test. And she made things so interesting, like the crucible, which was an interesting part of the class, and I'm sure anybody who had that class with me will agree that she made the crucible pretty weird. And I always listen to her. Everything she's told me, I make sure that I keep it with me, especially the movie recommendations like Harold and Maude. I loved that movie, and a lot of kids thought it was weird, but I remember, I think it was me and Catherine. We went up to her after class and we were just like, oh my gosh, we love Harold and Maude so much, we love it, we love it. And she kind of looked at us like, you weren't supposed to like it, you two are so weird. And I think that's when I kind of felt more connected to her, because she was kind of like, she was the different teacher, just like we were the different students, I guess. She made you feel a part of the group in a unique way, and she was just incredible.
One of the things that I remember about Mrs. Souza was that how in the middle of the school year she told me to come into lunch and talk to her about my grades because they were starting to fall. And she really emphasized how it's not that I get a good grade, it's that I pass the class. And that really helped me out, because at the beginning of it, my grades were really bad, and she really set me on the right path towards it. And one thing I remember about meeting her that day is her smile. She had one of those rare and perceptible smiles that you might come across 4 or 5 times in life, that seem to understand and hope in you, that you would want to be understood and hoped in.
Last year, my junior year, I walk into my English class, and Miss Sousa is my teacher, and she's taking roll, and she's getting down to my name, and she looks at the paper and she's like, "Oh, class, my son is here. My son, where are you?" And I'm like, I knew she was talking about me because of our last names being the same, and I was just like, here. And then ever since that day, I don't remember her calling me by my name. I just remember her calling me my son or son. And I just got comfortable with it, and I just started calling her mom, and I would play around with a whole bunch of students saying that she actually was my mom, and people would believe me. And whenever I'd go to the bathroom in her class, she would say, "Don't forget to wipe, honey." And it was just the funniest thing. And she wouldn't be afraid to make fun of students, and people would make fun of her for things, and there'd be just quiet days in our class where like we'd be taking a test or working on something, and she'd do something random like standing on her head for like a good 5 minutes, and we wouldn't know what to say, so we just stay quiet, and some people would be laughing still, and she would call Caesar Buddha and say, "Rub the Buddha belly for good luck," and then she would have these funny Chinese prophecies, and oh, I don't know, they're just funny, and then she would just take us for walks around the school, and she was just a fun teacher. Yeah, that was my mom. Sometimes bad things happen to good people, you know? It's sad.